So as usual, got the Anderson easel here, usual palette of colors. I'm painting on a 16 by 20 inch panel, and I'm thinking of making something of this scene right here. In particular, you know, the diagonal shoreline and then these clouds in the distance. Today I'm going to experiment toning with yellow ochre instead of burnt sienna, so we'll see how that goes. I'm going to thin it with some odorless mineral spirits. Actually, a little more than that. And you don't actually have to cover the whole panel. You know, usually I'll just get enough up on the panel that I can spread it around with a paper towel. Laura got a head start on me, so let's see what she's up to. Oh yeah, wow, that's beautiful already.
Well, we'll see. You know, these clouds are amazing.
Yeah.
There were a lot more of these sort of diaphanous clouds here, and now they're gone, but I still have some over here.
Over to the right here, yeah.
So I'll work on
what
that.
I like already is just is the abstract pattern that you've got. The design is really nice, and
good,
the values look good too. Like, you know, you're getting nice punch. You know, the light there, nice bits of orange coming through from your tone. It looks,
good.
Looks beautiful.
Let's see. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. So here's the compositional idea. There's like a jetty, a rock jetty that's coming out, but I think I'm going to use trees instead. So I'll have trees coming here, and then there's the distant hills, I think heading towards Carmel or Monterey down there. And then, you know, the surf is kind of coming in on a diagonal. And then the big focus is going to be on the cloud shapes. They're constantly moving, so as usual I'm just using them as raw materials. Kind of want to have a high peak over here and then maybe a secondary little peak there. So that's the initial idea, and but you know, I'll see how I feel about it after I block in the colors. I'm starting with the darkest color, which is the trees, and I'm using ultramarine with a touch of cadmium yellow medium, and then also some alizarin crimson to kind of gray it down, but also warm it up a little bit. Thinning with liquid as usual, and a little bit of odorless mineral spirits. Okay, so for the distant hills, I'm using ultramarine, titanium white, and a little bit of this leftover burnt sienna to kind of gray it down a bit, and a little bit of liquid. Maybe have it go out to about there. And as I've said many times, I'll be adjusting these values and colors, but I just want to cover the panel. Alright, so next I want to paint the wet sand here. I'm starting off with titanium white, ultramarine blue, and a touch of dioxazine purple. I'm trying to keep this as spontaneous and energetic as possible. All right, so there's some sky above the distant hills here. Really hard to see because it's so far away, but it's a little bit lighter than the distant hills. So I'm using titanium white and ultramarine blue, and a little bit lighter of a mix. This is sort of what I was using for the hills, so just a little bit lighter, mixing in some liquid. And one of the concerns I had, you know, toning with yellow, is that adding blue would create green, but the blue is going over the yellow nicely and doesn't seem to be picking up any of that color, which is great. And just like with waves, I'm trying to keep the clouds very irregular looking. So along the bottom of the clouds, there are some dark areas, and I want them to just be very spontaneous and kind of unpredictable. All right, so I just roughed in some shadow patterns here on these clouds using titanium white and ultramarine blue. I'm trying to keep the value a little bit lighter than a mid-tone value, and I'm just looking for interesting shapes at this point. I think the next thing I'll do is start coming in with some sky color here, which, as you can see, it goes from sort of a cerulean right above the clouds up to more of an ultramarine the higher you get. I'm going to try to keep the value as light as possible, but still get maximum saturation. All right, so I'm starting off with some phthalo blue green shade. This is a Utrecht color, but basically a phthalo blue. And the thing I like about it is that it's got super strong tinting power. So you can have a fairly saturated, high value blue. And that's what I'm after. A little bit of liquid. That's pretty good. I might even actually be able to go a little darker. So you got to go easy with this stuff because it's so strong. Mix that in to the titanium white, more liquid. This is basically going to define the tops of the clouds, right? So I can already see if this is the, you know, the light portion of the cloud. I can see, you know, whether I'm getting sufficient value contrast to have the lights pop out. And it doesn't appear to be picking up any of the yellow, which is great. So what color are you using for to mix up for your sand color here?
That is, I think, a Naples yellow light.
Oh yeah, Naples yellow light. Yeah, I used to use that.
Yeah, and also a little bit of raw sienna with white.
Okay.
Titanium white.
Yeah, looks good.
I feel like I need some. This is a relatively large space, so I feel like I need some lines, kind of perspective leading me into here. I
see what you're saying. Like sort of like, say, how there's sort of the dark blue sand or whatever, or you like sort of wet sand coming like that?
Well, the wet sand's going to be over here, but just debris in general instead of just one big space there.
Oh, I got you.
Just some noise.
Right, you know? Right. Maybe some of these logs.
Maybe, yeah, or rocks or
right, something. Or seaweed or something. Yeah. Okay, so I'm mixing up some color for the water, and I am using ultramarine blue and some burnt sienna to kind of push it towards green. A little bit of this leftover light blue mix here. And there's some waves in here, some darker waves, but I'll worry about that in a minute. All right, so at this point I'm using a smaller brush to sort of look for little shifts in color and value. So as you can see here, I've just indicated where this wave is, kind of like a dark blue-green, and then there's like a little bit of yellow at the tops of the waves where the light is shining through because there was a storm, and so it's kind of mixed up some sand and other debris in the water. I'm going to work on the horizon, which is just a slightly lighter value, but still darker than a lot darker than the sky. So. Nice dramatic elements, great color. Yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, when I first came here, the clouds were just all the way up. It really was dramatic, and it still is.
Yeah, oh no, for sure.
Changed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, as I was saying before, these kinds of clouds, they just seem to move very slowly, so we had a lot of time to look at them and figure out what went where.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, distant clouds, much easier to paint than, like, say, the ones up overhead.
Right.
Okay, so as I've mentioned in previous videos, I don't get the opportunity to paint clouds very often. California typically has blue skies except after storms. So this was an opportunity to paint some clouds. The main thing I was trying to achieve was a feeling of three-dimensionality, like, in other words, that there was some depth in the sky behind the clouds. And as I mentioned, trying to keep, you know, some of this cerulean sky here light in value but still saturated. I do feel like there's like decent separation there and a feeling of airiness. One thing that I'm always concerned with is trying to make sure that the dark portions of the clouds aren't too dark, so they don't feel too heavy. You know, that's something in the past that I've done. I've always, like, you know, I'll get the painting home and the dark portions will just be too dark. You know, you can see here this wave is really dark, and then also these distant trees. So, you know, by comparing, you can see that the value is still fairly light. What I could possibly do is simplify some of the dark areas so that it's not, you know, as broken up as it appears to be here. So, you know, like, say this area here, just make this one clear dark area. And then over here, maybe find like a dark pattern where I connect some of these smaller shapes into larger shapes. Although the clouds did, you know, look like this. They did, you know, have lots of little highlights and sort of a random dark pattern. One other thing I could do compositionally, I could have pushed the cloud, you know, maybe this cloud up higher towards the top. But overall, it was really enjoyable to paint the clouds. I mean, obviously, they're constantly moving. The ocean's constantly moving, too. So definitely challenging, but also sort of liberating or freeing in a way. Very fun to just see what, you know, the next cloud pattern was, or what, you know, what was happening in the ocean. A couple things I'll mention about color. One thing I noticed in the ocean here, it was like a blue-green in the distance. But then I noticed there's a lot of red in the ocean. I've talked about that before. So I took that blue-green mix and I mixed in alizarin, and it almost started heading towards purple, which is really interesting. And that's something I see in the water a lot, that you know, that there's a lot of red in the ocean water. The other thing that I think worked out pretty well is keeping the sand very transparent. And this is where dioxazine purple really comes in handy. I start with yellow ochre and titanium white, which tends to be a pretty saturated yellow. So then I gray it down using dioxazine purple, and then add even more dioxazine purple to darken it for the areas where, you know, the white water and the sand meet. So the dioxazine purple is a really handy color for graying down yellows. It's just, you know, instead of having to mix a purple, since I like to gray down using complements. As far as the yellow tone, you know, toning the panel with yellow, it's very, very subtle. It's so subtle that in the areas where I can see little bits of the panel showing through, you know, but I can't even really see the yellow. So I think that for me, toning with burnt sienna is the way to go. Again, it's a very light tone, but I'm gonna stick with that. You can see some of the burnt sienna sketch coming through, little bits of the orange. I really like that. So I think I'm gonna, you know, it's fun to experiment with the yellow ochre you know, toning with yellow ochre, but like I said, it's just too light and imperceptible. So yeah, going back to the burnt sienna. All right, so as usual, let me know what you guys think in the comments. I will put a link to Maura's Instagram in the description below. Also, I just had a great conversation with Emma Krebs, the Curious One podcast. It was like a 2-hour conversation talking about art, and not only like the process of art, but also just living a creative life. Like I said, great conversation. If you're interested in checking that out, I will put a link to the Curious One podcast down below in the description. Also, if you'd like to see some extra videos and help support the channel, there's a Patreon link below. The last 2 videos were, I did like sort of sit down video where I talk about the things that I think worked in my paintings over this last year, things I hope to improve on next year, that sort of thing. And then also just did a video where I take a look at the cloud paintings of Maynard Dixon and Edgar Payne, trying to figure out what I think works in those paintings, things that I can, you know, maybe techniques or approaches I can use in my cloud paintings in the future. So anyway, if that sounds interesting, check it out. Like I said, Patreon link below. Other than that, stay creative, and I'll see you guys in the next video.